Anyone out there working the graveyard shift right now? Consider yourselves lucky. This story happened to one of our listeners, Joe. Back in 2012, Joe's ex-husband gambled away every dime they had to their name. She filed for divorce and started raising her daughter, Annie, on her own. Around that time, Joe partnered up with a friend to run a roadside motel because the regular night auditor had a family emergency and took an extended leave. Joe temporarily stepped up to cover the graveyard shift because she was slammed with work and could not get away. She had Annie stay over at her parents' house for the time being. Fair warning, this story does not ease you in gently. The motel was out in the middle of nowhere. It was supposed to be some booming commercial park, but the developers went bankrupt halfway through, cleaving it a dead-end ghost town. Fortunately, the city built a new Amtrak station right down the road. The straight line distance was maybe 2 miles. Plus, Joe and her partner actually gave a damn and ran a tight ship, so they kept the motel in pretty good shape. They never really had to worry about keeping the rooms booked. It was the second night of Joe taking over the graveyard shift. It was pretty dead that night. A few hourly rooms had checked out and needed to be turned over with fresh linens. But Joe was not feeling great, so she left them as is. She figured she would just wait for the housekeeping staff to arrive in the morning and let them handle it all at once. She lay down on the cot inside the front desk office to get some rest, just scrolling on her phone until around 11 at night. Suddenly, Joe heard a muffled, heavy thud coming from outside the front doors. Because her attention had been entirely on her screen, she didn't catch the exact direction of the sound. She could not tell if it came from far away or right up close. Since they were out in that busted development zone, the streets were completely dead at night, but the street lights were still glaringly bright. Because of that, local punks on dirt bikes were always out there drag racing in the dark. She figured, but it was probably just the sound of a motorbike backfiring, but she threw on her jacket anyway and decided to go out and take a look. She walked out and stood right under the front entrance. The motel faced a wide-open 4-lane road. It gave her a clear line of sight in every direction. She looked around for a long time, but could not find the source of the noise. She turned around and went back inside. She lay back down on the cot and went back to scrolling, but she kept smelling right next to her this nasty, heavy, metallic scent of blood. It would drift over in waves, just wave after wave. She even got up to look for it, but she could not find where the smell was coming from. It was not coming from her. They bleached and scrubbed the front desk area every single day. There was no way there was a dead rat rotting in the corner. It was driving her crazy. She spent time tearing the office apart, searching for about 10 minutes. Then a woman's blood-curdling scream erupted from outside. She quickly rushed back out. She ran to the front doors. A man and a woman were standing outside. They were probably a couple. They were dragging a massive suitcase behind them. They looked like they had just gotten off a train. At that moment, the woman was burying her face into the guy's chest. The guy was staring in absolute horror right above Joe's head. Joe turned around and looked up. Her blood instantly turned to ice. Right above her was a tempered glass canopy. Right directly over her head, twisted into a completely unnatural, folded shape on top of that canopy hung a woman. By this time, right at the entrance, on the pavement, a massive pool of blood had already seeped through the cracks of the canopy. They immediately called the cops. When the police arrived, they went upstairs to check the corresponding room. The motel only had 3 floors. In the room directly above the canopy on the 3rd floor, they found a man. He was already foaming at the mouth. He was dead. When they looked into it later, the whole story came out. The dead guy in the room and the woman on the canopy were not married. She was his mistress. For whatever reason, things had gone completely south between them. The woman slipped something into his food, and then, after watching him eat it, she threw herself out of the 3rd floor window. Normally, dropping 3 stories onto a glass canopy would not necessarily kill you on impact. The height just was not enough, but the fatal flaw was how the canopy was installed. Up there were a few thick angled steel rebar support rods holding it up. Basically, her head landed directly on one of those steel rods and got cracked wide open. At first, when Joe was inside the office, that muffled thud she heard must have been the exact moment that woman hit at the canopy from 3 floors up. As the manager on duty Joe tactfully cooperated with the rescue and investigation. She finally got the motel cleared of any liability. She had been awake all night. When she got back to her parents' house, she told them everything that had happened. Her parents comforted her for a bit. Joe went to catch up on some sleep. Right as she was walking into the bedroom, she suddenly heard her dad from inside the bathroom let out a sharp gasp. Joe asked her dad what was wrong. He didn't come out. He just mumbled evasively from inside the bathroom. He just said it was nothing, nothing at all. He told Joe to get some rest. When she finally woke up, it was already past midnight. Joe sat up in bed. She felt this agonizing pain radiating through her entire body. Her throat was completely swollen shut. She could barely breathe. They had to rush her to the ER in the middle of the night for an IV drip. From that point on, Joe's health went straight downhill day by day. She had zero energy. As for the motel's business, she handed over full control to her partner. Joe went back to her own apartment. She focused on taking care of Annie and trying to recover. But ever since she moved back into her own place, Joe constantly felt like inside her home, aside from her and her daughter, there was a third person living there. She did not explicitly say she saw anyone standing anywhere. She just noticed things in the house had been obviously rummaged through, like right before you go to bed, the tissue box would be sitting perfectly normal, but when you wake up in the morning, you find the lid popped open, and the tissues inside are scattered all over the floor or random drawers in the house, and cabinets would just be hanging wide open for no reason. It even got to the point where, late at night while sleeping, she could hear the unmistakable clatter of pots and pans moving around in the kitchen. The doors and windows were dead-bolted, and they lived on the 16th floor. There was basically zero chance someone was climbing in from the outside. At night, Annie would be sleeping soundly right next to her. It forced Joe's mind to start drifting toward the supernatural. So Joe told her parents what was going on. Her parents took it extremely seriously. They told the two of them to come stay at their place for the time being. Her parents also reached out to a local specialist. They got some protective charms for both of them to wear. They set up wards all around the apartment. They figured after throwing everything at the wall, things at home would finally quiet down. Instead, it only got violently worse. One night, her parents had gone to bed early. Joe was with her daughter, sitting on the living room couch, watching TV. All the lights in the house were off. Halfway through, Annie said she wanted some fruit. Joe told her the fruit was already washed and sitting in the kitchen. She told her to go grab it herself. Joe was completely engrossed in her show when she heard Annie constantly muttering from inside the kitchen, "Where is it? Where is it?" Joe called out, saying the fruit bowl was right there on the counter. She said it was right in front of her face. Joe subconsciously turned her head to look toward the kitchen. Through the glass partition separating the living room and the kitchen, she saw Annie bent over, looking for the fruit bowl. And plastered tightly onto Annie's back was a folded up woman. The back of her head was pressed all the way down to her own rear end. In the dim, flickering light of the TV, Joe saw that the woman was wearing a hoodie. It looked incredibly familiar. She had one hand covering one of her eyes, and she was smiling right at Joe. Joe let out a blood-curdling scream and vaulted off the couch. She practically flew into the kitchen, ready to rip that woman right off her daughter's back. But when she grabbed, her hands caught empty air. The woman vanished into thin air. All that was left was Annie, still bent over at the waist. Her eyes were completely glazed over, looking aimlessly for something in a total trance. No matter how loudly she yelled, Annie would not snap out of it. Her eyes were only half open, and she could not straighten her back. She just stayed bent over like that, muttering under her breath, just saying, "Where is it? Where is it?" Joe's screaming woke her parents up. They rushed out. They flipped on every single light in the house. Joe told them exactly what she just saw. Her dad's face turned dead serious. He grabbed a meat cleaver and started cussing up a storm, pacing the house. Her mom immediately got on the phone. She called in every favor and contact she had to get someone down there. It was not until late the next morning that a real specialist showed up at the house. They had to pull some serious strings to find him. They paid a heavy price for it too. The second he stepped through the door, he cringed and groaned. He said the stench of blood in their house was overpowering. Then, he turned to her parents and asked for a metal rod. He said anything would work. as long as it was metal and reasonably long. Her dad scrambled to find something. He finally snapped the handle off a mop. It was a hollow stainless steel tube. He handed it to the specialist. The guy took the steel tube and started walking around the house. He poked at one corner. He prodded at another. Nobody had a clue what he was looking for. Finally, he walked into the bathroom, reached by the washing machine in the bathroom. In the narrow gap against the wall, he used the pole to fish out a piece of clothing. It was exactly that kind of hoodie, the kind that looks like a classic pullover. The second that hoodie was pulled out, man, an unbelievably foul, rotting stench of blood hit them. It was so bad they could barely breathe in the room. The moment Jo saw the hoodie, she recognized it instantly. She said that hoodie was the exact one she was wearing the night she worked the graveyard shift, and then it hit her. She remembered the folded up woman she saw last night. She was wearing this exact same hoodie. Seeing this, her dad's face drained of all color and twisted up. After pressing him for the truth, it all came spilling out. That morning when Jo got back, she had taken the hoodie off. She tossed it on top of the washing machine to be cleaned. When her dad went into the bathroom later, he decided to help out and throw it in the wash for her. But when he was checking the pockets and the hood, he found a human eyeball stuck inside the hood. It was completely flattened, dried up and glued right to the fabric. When her dad heard Jo's story about what happened at the motel, he knew exactly where that thing came from. He didn't want to terrify Jo, so he kept his mouth shut. He just scraped it off and flushed it down the toilet. When the specialist pulled the hoodie out now, her dad was completely dumbfounded. He swore that after he found that thing on the hoodie that day, he didn't even wash it. He stuffed it straight into a garbage bag and threw it away. He had no idea how it was still inside the house. The specialist explained it plainly. He said that night when Jo went outside to check on the noise and stood out there looking around, that thing fell right through the cracks of the canopy. It landed perfectly inside her hood, and that heavy metallic scent she kept smelling when she lay back down was coming directly from that. That folded up woman was just looking for her missing piece. The specialist folded the hoodie up tight. He stuffed it into a yellow canvas bag and took it away. Nobody knows what he did with it, but from that day on, that folded up woman never followed Jo or her family again.